Members will, nothing further in public input. I've got local board input signalled from Chair Shane Henderson for item 12, and that will be presented at the item. And that's at this stage looking like noon. I'd like to acknowledge two chairs that are with us here observing today, and that's Harry Doig, Chair of Puka Papa, and Chair Angela Dalton, Chair at Manuriwa. Welcome to you both. There are no extraordinary items. There are no notices of motion, which takes us to item 9, and that is the long-awaited sea change report. And I have staff here, and Dave Allen and Jacques Victor coming to present on this. And members, I know the A3 at attachment A was a little bit blurred, my apology, but if you go to the hub and dial it up, you will see that it's a lot easier to read. We have some extra copies, Dave. I wonder if the Secretariat could just distribute those. Dave, while that's being undertaken, would you like to introduce? And you've got a short presentation, I understand.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, councillors. The intent today is to just provide you a brief overview of the Sea Change project following the initial evaluation of the Auckland Council group. And I've got about 10 slides here just to quickly run through. And this will sort of articulate kind of the next steps as well at the end in terms of what we envisage going forward on behalf of Auckland Council. Oops. Okay, so the purpose of the presentation is to give you a brief background, some of the summary of the main themes from the plan that's been produced, and some high-level observations from Auckland Council staff across the group. So that is not just council departments, but our CCOs. And in addition to that, I just indicated that we'll have a next step slide at the very end, which sort of just rounds off the presentation. So Sea Change, a marine spatial planning exercise, was conducted over the last 3 years. It was released publicly on the 6th of December. The plan is now available on the Sea Change project website. It's a non-statutory document. It's non-binding on agencies. The plan's vision as such is to ensure that the Hauraki Gulf is vibrant with life, it's Māori strong, productive and supporting healthy and prosperous communities. The agencies involved with the supporting the plan in terms of ensuring that it was developed over the last few years have been asked now to consider the plan and its recommendations. The plan structure consists of 4 main themes, and these are outlined in these circles on this diagram taken from the plan. They are effectively replenishing the food basket, a mountains to sea approach, a guardianship approach, prosperous communities, and these themes have within them a number of cross-cutting initiatives that contribute to these particular themes. And we'll talk about those initiatives. There's 5 initiatives in a minute, but to deliver on these themes, the plan actually proposes about 67 objectives, about 189 management actions, and about 67 research topics. So it's quite a big collection of information, and here's the 5 initiatives that the plan typically outlines. They focus on the initiative of fish stock and aquaculture initiative, biodiversity and habitat restoration, Gulf sediment and water quality, ahu moana, and kaitiakitanga and guardianship. And they're the 5 main initiatives that contribute to those big themes for the whole plan. Within each of those initiatives, there are a range of management actions and objectives, and some of the summarising of those is in that diagram there, and we've also summarised them in the paper itself that's provided. Some of the key messages in the plan is that the past and current actions to achieve that vision are not actually working, that there's an assertion that the plan must be adopted in its entirety as an integrated package, There is a need for a lot more information to support management decisions going forward, in particular as it relates to improving environmental, social and cultural outcomes. There is a clear direction that there needs to be some governance and management changes required, and in setting out the vision for the plan and the management objectives, the plan also recognises that treaty settlements and other related interests are not to be diminished or affected, and there's other processes for those to be resolved. Some very high-level observations were made by a group of about 20 different senior staff across the different departments and CCOs over the last couple of months, and prior to that we held about 25 meetings with different department staff, including CCOs, and got their perspectives on the plan and its contents as it related to their particular activities. So the high-level observations include the fact that the Sea Change Plan is quite comprehensive in terms of identifying options to improve the Hauraki Gulf. The plan does endorse a lot of actions that are already underway to improve the health of the Gulf. The recommendations made, though, don't necessarily reflect what is currently already happening or some of the statutory constraints as to why some things may not be happening. And then in reflecting on how the plan could be picked up by the different agencies in the context of local councils, for Auckland we've just gone through the unitary plan process, and so therefore we've sort of an opportunity has been lost in that sense in terms of actually picking up some of the aspects of the plan. But the good thing about the Auckland unitary plan is that it does address all the legacy issues that were around before that was put through. So it does provide us a good basis on which to compare going forward. The Waikato Regional Council is about to go through a number of statutory processes in its activities. One of those relates to the Healthy Waters package that they're advancing for the Waikato catchment, and separated off from that is the Hauraki Coromandel plan change number 2, which would be probably looking to be undertaken from 2018. So there's an opportunity for the sort of Firth of Thames in terms of some of the statutory considerations that Waikato will be looking at there. The other thing is that they're doing the coastal plan review next year, starting next year, so there'll be an opportunity there for some further public input next year and picking up some of the recommendations from the Sea Change Plan and bringing them across into the public coastal plan review process. The other observation that a number of the departments and CCOs made is that there's quite a few drivers in terms of how the Auckland region or the Gulf region is managed, and one of those, as an example, is managing water quality in the context of growth. And there was a concern that some of those growth considerations weren't adequately taken on board in considering how some of the environmental outputs would be wanting to be addressed. So that's something that agency staff are particularly mindful of when we look at this, the range of management actions proposed. The proposals are not costed, and that's something that will need to happen just to work out what sort of implications this will have for the various agencies or other parties involved. Some of the timeframes that have been proposed may need to shift a little bit. This might actually achieve more integrated and smarter, effective implementation, so that's actually a positive. And it might also better acknowledge some of the lead-in times required for some of the agencies and some of their work programs to adjust. So these are kind of significant considerations that perhaps weren't taken on board during the development phase. The other observation is that there's a range of different interests out in the community and as well as with the agencies themselves, and they've got a number of significant existing commitments and future implications of implementing the recommendations will have a number of implications, whether they are political, operational, or through treaty settlement implications as well. So there's quite a lot of factors to consider in looking at how the plan is picked up and rolled out. So for Auckland Council, some of the key aspects that we've identified that will relate to activities here are things like water quality, accessibility to the Gulf, biodiversity outcomes, governance issues, and aquaculture in the medium to longer term. As I indicated, there are some significant recommendations as it relates to governance and management change promoted. These are at a number of different levels, whether it's a formation of a new panel to consider blue design principles, for example, when looking at coastal infrastructure, or whether it might be something more about how the coastal zone is managed with the input of mana whenua and coastal communities, and that's something that's identified through the Ahu Moana initiative. As I've also indicated, there are some treaty settlements issues, and there are some suggestions around what the attributes might be for a new sort of Hauraki Gulf governance entity, which would help with coordinating some of the roles within, or picking up some of the sea change recommendations. I just wanted to give you an example of the kind of approach the departments and CCOs applied to evaluating the output of the plan. This is just as I said, there was quite a few recommendations that were put forward. This is just 3 objectives that related to water quality, and underneath those objectives there are a number of management actions proposed, and applying a traffic light type of system, staff were able to make an assessment as to whether or not something was achievable, practical, within their mandate, or maybe needed something like a bit more refinement in terms of some of the ideas that have been put forward. So it was saying, well, actually that's the tool that you might use to address a particular outcome, but it's not the only one. So there may be other ways to actually address the issue you're looking at. So in those cases we might have said, well, that's okay, we can just highlight that as a yellow situation whereby we'd be looking to recommend a whole range of complementary and integrated approaches to addressing particular outcomes. And then we had another category for red, which might have been not technically feasible or not practicable, or maybe very dependent on other things like change in legislation, which might be quite a driver. It's not to say that it would be permanently red, but it would need significant change in some way to actually make it more amenable to change and implementation. So just in terms of next steps, I have outlined that in the last, probably from January to March this year, the different departments and CEOs got together and talked about the plan and what it contained. We've brought this paper to you now as a first opportunity to give you an initial appraisal of the plan, and what we would like to do is for the planning committee to direct the council departments and CCOs to go back and actually develop up some work programs to actually look at how some of these options could be further explored. Some of them might be an enhancement on an existing activity. It might just need a bit of tweaking in terms of budgets or resource to apply to those activities. Some things may be completely new activities that will need to be identified in a proposed work program going forward, and some of those can be better, or there'll be a need for actually assessing what the costs will be associated with those particular initiatives, what are the synergies with other work, and what other factors may be applicable to actually progressing some of those activities. One of the other things is that while each agency has gone away and doing their own assessment in terms of their own particular activities, there is now the opportunity for us, having had that first 3 months to look at this plan, to actually start some of our cross-agency discussions, and obviously we'd be looking to work quite closely, particularly with Waikato, in terms of some of the initiatives that they have under the RMA and local government initiatives. What we're suggesting is that in the paper we've said within 6 months that we would come back to the Environment and Community Committee and provide, get the department leads to come back to the Environment and Community Committee and provide an idea of what the work program should be, what are the things that they've picked up that they can change within the existing activity, where are the new LTP bids that might be required to address some of these initiatives, and what other opportunities might there be to actually pick up some of these management actions. But so within 6 months, and what I've suggested is that just to keep the momentum going as we bring that back a little bit earlier in terms of coming back to the Environment and Community Committee with some sort of overview report to say this is roughly how the different departments and CCOs are responding to this committee's determination today, and looking to try and come back to the Environment and Community Committee by September this year, so it's about a 4-month time period. To actually just keep the momentum going, and recognising that a number of other agencies are going to be probably getting into that stage of development of work as well. So yeah, I think that's probably, all I'll say at this point in time, just to simply note that there has been quite a process to get to this point where we have facilitated a number of discussions across the council group, and there is quite a strong desire, I think, to actually identify feasible things in a sensible way and look to continue the momentum going forward to address the issues identified. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I'll open it up for questions. Just before I go to members' questions, Dave, as I mentioned to you when we had a run through yesterday, one of the absences I see here is the role of the Hauraki Golf Forum. And I would be proposing a Roman 5 that we add the role of the Hauraki Golf Forum in supporting the recommendations of Sea Change. So I will add that to my recommendations when I put them up. And then there's also a second one. I appreciate this work coming. It was confirmed by the Sea Change group in December. It seems a long time back, and it's taken a while to get to that stage. And doing that, I'd like to acknowledge former councillor Penny Webster for her work in chairing it, and I'd also like to acknowledge Councillor Mike Lee as being our other representative on that steering group. It's been an arduous journey, Dave. There's a lot of expectation. I think there's also a lot of expectation of Auckland Council. The other agencies, the other councils are looking towards us to lead off on this. We are the major contributor, or one of the major contributors, not discounting the value of all those other agencies, including mana whenua representatives. I'm of the view that, one, we do need to understand the role of the Hauraki Golf Forum in supporting these Sea Change recommendations. I'm also of the view that we probably need to give greater impetus by establishing a political reference group or steering group, and I'll put those words up, to oversee the recommendations that we're possibly making today and the recommendations of Sea Change. So in the first instance, could you respond to me and to us on the proposal to reference the Hauraki Golf Forum and establish a political reference group or steering group?
So maybe I'll just flick that around a little. Firstly, I'll identify that we have got this Roman B3 there, which talks about working with other agencies who share similar goals and responsibilities, and I think that's consistent with what Councillor Darby has just identified, is that we are on the same page in terms of wanting to work collaboratively across the board with those agencies, including the Hauraki Golf Forum. One thing I'd note is that the council evaluation group would probably, I think, welcome also perhaps the chairs of the Planning Committee and the Environment and Community Committee perhaps coming to their meeting and just articulate maybe the view of the Planning Committee in this case as to what the expectations might be going forward. And I was sort of thinking about this overnight, is that we're intending to bring that evaluation group together again, and that would be a useful contribution from the chairs of this council. But equally, the political steering group is an idea that's probably worth fostering with a broader range of councillors to take on some higher level issues that will inevitably occur. So.
Okay, look, I'll let the members ponder that before I put it up, but I would anticipate that maybe it is the chair and deputy chair of those two committees and a representative from the Independent Māori Statutory Board.
Yep.
Councillor Cashmore.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Chair, I can
Mr. Mayor.
support you on the idea of a political working party of reference, because I think that's probably a good oversight. Dave, thank you for this. It's complicated and complex. I read through the whole document quite some time ago, and there's lots in it that we can't directly affect. So where are we going to be working with MPI and DOC? So where are they at? And also looking at the Waikato Regional Council, their proposed 2 rivers, 2 waters issue may end up in the Environment Court, likely. And it's another part, it's not starting to 2018. So to get a sound result here, we need actually a coordinated front going forward. So how important is that sort of collaboration and timing, do you think, tied up with this?
I think, firstly, there's a number of initiatives that Auckland Council can take by itself. There's a lot of stuff to be sorted out within this region. Having said that, we are also identifying that we do want to work collaboratively with other agencies as much as possible. And in terms of implementing the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management, there may be some crossover issues that we want to identify with Waikato, and they are clearly key issues affecting the Gulf in terms of both nutrients and sedimentation. So I think there is a need for us to work collaboratively with Waikato in the lead up to their plan change that they're proposing for next year, and also in terms of the regional coastal plan, in terms of some of the economic opportunities that might relate to aquaculture, for example. So that's the point there. The other one about the central government agencies was MPI and DOC have just apparently put advice to their ministers in the last couple of weeks.
Okay.
And so they are kind of hinting that they are expecting to make some announcement soon. They haven't kind of given us a definite timeline, but I think the indication from them is that they are starting to take they are looking to sort of push ahead with things that are clearly their responsibility. So to me, that sort of starts to hint at things like fisheries management, marine protected area legislation, and possibly some governance issues, maybe the 3 things that they'll be probably highlighting as kind of issues that they wish to pursue. And I think then the question becomes, from a political steering group point of view, how does Auckland Council wish to engage in that discussion going forward?
Just a subsequent, Mr. Chair, one other thing, David, please correct me if I'm wrong, but recalling after reading the plan, there was a considerable lack of potential input from new age science. That stuff is coming out. I was reading an article this morning that animals can have a collar put on them, and that is done by satellite to keep them out of waterways. So that's sort of all this new age stuff's coming through, new species to reduce animal emissions, less fertiliser inputs, so forth. So the document from memory did not mention that sort of science. Is there a place to bring some of this new fast-moving technologies into what we're doing in context of this plan?
Yes, the simple answer is yes, and they did actually identify in one of their chapters, right near the end, a sort of a discussion around research and innovation kind of areas and trying to get collaboration between Crown Research Institutes, universities, and whether that's for aquaculture purposes, whether that's for farming technology, whether it's for something else. They're actually hinting at some sort of hub of sort of innovation. So there is avenue for that kind of discussion and initiative in this plan.
My last point, Mr. Chair, would be to you, as far as the Hauraki Gulf Forum's concerned, I think we need to understand exactly what that may be going to look like as well, and how it's going to be funded and so forth. And I guess that's a work with the government. But
Absolutely. Thank you. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Yes, first of all, I'd just like to endorse the comments that you're making, Mr. Chair, around the Hauraki Gulf Forum and the role that it can play, given that it's an existing agency with an act. The question I've got goes to B2, and that's particularly around prioritisation. And the concern that I would bring to the table is that right now, as a consequence of the unitary plan and various developments, we've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tonnes of sediment going into sensitive coastal areas where there are marine reserves. So within what's proposed in B2, are we looking at immediate runs on the board where we can make a change now? Because my concern is that talk just tends to procrastinate. And the damage that is being done now is of an order of magnitude probably higher than what we've seen in Auckland for many, many years.
So,
The question goes to prioritisation and runs on the board now.
so one of the issues with prioritisation relates to what information is currently available as a baseline to assess some of these issues. One of the suggestions in the plan is that there needs to be more baseline information available on how the sediment is actually tracking over time. It's quite a complicated thing to actually have those baseline calculations as to what level of sediment is actually turning up in particular catchments around the Gulf. So I think it is nonetheless, as the council has identified, it is obviously a very important issue that needs to be pushed through. We need to then ask ourselves, how does that relate to some of the expectations in the unitary plan? How are we taking on board that issue with structure planning? How are we taking on that sort of consideration in our research program? So there's actually quite a few initiatives that could be taken to address this issue. It's multi-pronged.
Correct. So
Yeah.
my related question, Mr Chairman, is what work are you doing to identify those requirements? And they go to monitoring, enforcement. Critically, they go to resources and what we've got in our annual plan and our long-term plan to actually walk the talk and do the stuff. Because my understanding is right now we're too thin on the ground and we're not allocating sufficient resource to deal with these issues. So what work are you doing around providing us with some budgetary information for what we need to do?
So that's what we're intending to do for the next stage, for the next 3 months, is actually to start to get the departments and CCOs to actually look at what their existing programs are and actually saying, are they addressing some of the needs we have identified or that the plan has identified, and what can we put back to our councillors in terms of priorities that they wish to pursue.
And in respect of that, are we going to have a spectrum, not just a do little, but a do a lot more?
I think that's part of the option thing, is that if you want to achieve quite a lot, then we'll put up probably options that will show you a lot of effort required. So I think that comes back to kind of us going back to the CCOs and department heads and saying, let's look at a range of options so councillors have a choice as to what they might wish to pursue.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Mickley.
Yes, I'm happy with the officer's recommendations. With all due respect, Mr Chair, I'm not happy with yours. I think you're jumping the gun here. First of all, there is some legal confusion about the Hauraki Gulf Forum and a governance role. Hauraki Gulf Forum is not a governing body. This is, the Auckland Council has a governing body. The Hauraki Gulf Forum is a forum, and its legal responsibilities are set out at length in the Act. And governance, a governing role in implementing sea change or anything else is not a part of it. So I would have to oppose that. Establishing a political reference group, again, is jumping the gun, because we're still going through a very deliberate a process of determining what is feasible for this council to carry out, budget for that, and so on, and at the same time looking at what the Crown is doing. So setting up an in-group, if you don't mind me saying, of the two chairs and deputy chairs and a member of the IMSB, to oversee stuff that we haven't even worked out yet what we're going to do. So there may be a place for a steering group at some stage, but the staff work needs to be done first, and it needs to be done in a very careful, deliberate way in coordination with other agencies, not Auckland jumping the gun. If we want to jump the gun, we should do something about the 2.8 million cubic metres of human sewage going into the Hauraki Gulf from Auckland. That's what we should be doing.
Have you got a question at all, Councillor Lee?
No, I'm just telling you that I'm opposed to your recommendations. I support the officer's recommendations.
Okay.
What do you
The
suggest,
the
Mike?
C on the board is
Take them
actually
out.
not quite as I drafted it, and I just want to come back to that. But I'll take a question from Member Namani.
Kia ora. Just one question, because I think it's in the report, but I just need clarification.
C is
Within the 6-month evaluation process that council will advance on this, do you envisage engaging with mana whenua in any way, or is that post-decision?
What we've identified in the implementation section, I think, of the report is that there would be opportunity for us to go and involve mana whenua, but also other parties as well, like local boards. There are two different things, obviously, but I just want to just more broadly say that we think that there's an opportunity, given there's quite a focus on local initiatives, for us to look at how those local initiatives can be better identified and basically populating any proposals that come forward from CCOs and departments.
So as part of this within 6-month process?
Yep.
Okay. The other question is, we note that the IMSB, the treaty audit that they undertook in 2015, one of the outstanding actions from that relates to policy for mana whenua participation in natural resource management, and as a subset of that theme, co-governance, co-management is part of that, along with joint management agreements, transfer of power, other I suppose, tools or mechanisms. I understand it was due in June 2016. That deadline wasn't met. There was a revised deadline of December 2016. That wasn't met. And I think the point being made is, in order to, I suppose, evaluate some of those matters that might overlap that topic, in absence of an approved council policy on that, really does, I suppose, leave the door open on this and any other item that might come up, that council are really determining these matters on a case-by-case basis, rather than a strategic, considered view of their policy on co-governance and co-management. So I just wanted to note that, because I think that's an important component that's outstanding, been outstanding for a couple of years now, and that could well weave nicely into this process. So I just wanted to kind of bring that to your attention.
Yeah, thank you for that.
So just one more, it's kind of a statement, a question. In the Māori impact statement on paragraph 44, it makes reference to treaty claims related matters. I just think it's important to be very clear about this. While I know, as I understand, the primary issue generated around treaty was about commercial aquaculture and fisheries settlements in the Hauraki Gulf, and any potential changes in fishing arrangements in the Gulf and the impact that that might have, that's not affected. So there was that. And I also note that harbour negotiations in the Hauraki Gulf have not commenced yet. And it kind of infers in 44 that they're underway or taking place. So the Crown has yet to initiate any harbours negotiations in relation to the Hauraki Gulf. It was just a matter of clarity.
Thank you again.
Correction.
Yep, thank you, Liam.
Thank you, Member Namani. Just in terms of a point you made earlier, Dave, about the... Just trying to find my note. Well, it's referred to on page in the report that sea change doesn't fully reflect the Auckland Council, unitary plan, etc. Originally, from memory, sea change was ideally going to inform the unitary plan, but it it got delayed. Was that not the intent at the very earliest outset?
My understanding is that the timeframes were kind of known when this project was started, that there would be a unitary plan and there would be opportunity to inform the planning process, but obviously the timelines didn't all marry up in the end. I guess what we would be wanting to highlight is that there will no doubt be further opportunities for Auckland to take on board some of the recommendations in the Sea Change Plan in that planning context when the time arrives. In some respects, I think having the legacy council issues resolved into a unitary plan is actually helpful, because now you've kind of got one menu to look at, and then you can sort of say, well, how do we look at the sea change recommendations and marry them across into the new context for how we are operating going forward. So I actually think, in some respects, it's not a bad thing that the sea change plan has come out after the unitary plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not you're not suggesting it is a negative that we don't align, and there is the potential to align, and the Waikato plan is probably more aligned because it's just it's come after, or their work has come after our unitary plan work.
Yes, and that's correct. And I guess I would just then highlight also that we would take the opportunity to work alongside Waikato to sort of look at some of the common themes that might apply across the two different regions, and such that if we were then going to have a plan change in the Auckland region at some later stage for a particular topic, we'd be well placed, and stakeholders would be well placed to be informed about what might happen.
Thank you. I just want to note and acknowledge Jacques and your group for bringing forward from 6 months to 4 months, because there is a lot of interest in this for the very reasons I outlined earlier. And members, I'd just like to go through to the recommendations in red, if they'll be ready very soon. Are there any other questions that members might have?
Oh, sorry, just a quick one.
Councillor
We've got
Coote.
the traffic light system here, which says red is not council's responsibility. Is this relating, the report relate to this chart?
Yes.
But it says AET, which is a council organisation, so I'm just confused as to why it's red, because
sorry. Yep.
AET is a council organisation.
Sorry, it's probably more the fact that it's not so much about whether it's a council responsibility in that respect, but it's more about, in this particular one that they've identified, they're saying that they have got a number of other strategic documents that they feel needs to take sort of precedence in terms of how it's considered, how the issues are considered. So they're
Sorry, AET say that?
Yes.
Okay.
In this particular example, I think you're highlighting here, they're trying to say in this particular example that they have some legislative responsibilities under the regional public transport plan, so therefore they can't necessarily adjust their things unless those sorts of things are taken into account. So it's not so much the
That they aren't responsible, but that it's difficult for them to respond
It's difficult for them to respond.
statutorily.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watson?
Thanks. And this just follows on from some of the other questions asked by the council. And I'm looking at the plans initiatives, and in particular the Gulf Sediment and Water Quality Initiative, and that in both instances there is within Auckland Council's responsibilities. And I note that the slide went up talking about a sedimentation goal, as an example, out to 2050, like 30-odd years from henceforth. We do already have those sort of sediment and nutrient load limits for various catchment areas that exist now, and that are monitored, because I on a reasonably frequent basis get complaints from people, particularly in areas like the Kura Long Bay Marine area, about these limits being breached. And I know Councillor Walker referred to the problem with enforcement or resource, or whatever you like to call it. I just wonder, given this exists now, it's in our area of responsibility. How we in kind of good faith go forward with this kind of sort of bold plan when really on the face of it there's quite serious shortcomings in our own involvement now as it goes to one of these initiatives that we have nearly sole responsibility for.
And I think that's part of the gap analysis that we want to say. If there are some problems, we want to identify those and flush them out a little bit. The other comment I'd make, though, is that we have a national policy statement for freshwater management, and we have an implementation program that the council has endorsed. And one of the key things that's happening there is that 10 watershed plans are being developed, led by our Healthy Waters department. And so that will give you an idea of current state, and then we'll be working on management scenarios that might flow, that will then be generated to sort of say, well, how do we see improvements in the current state if the current state is below national bottom lines? So there's work at a number of different levels, and I'm just highlighting that the NPSFM implementation program, which there'll be a councillor workshop on it in June, will identify at the catchment level kind of what are our goals that we're seeking to achieve. So I think there's, as you say, a lot of existing activity already. It's a case of now marrying that up and actually better dovetailing sort of our compliance work, for example, with the management outcomes expected through a watershed plan, for example.
Thank you. So we'll just roll up the recommendations again, members, and thank you, Dave. Thank you, Jacques. So, as Dave told us, there are other agencies, but the Hauraki Gulf Forum has a unique role. And I'm wanting to understand what that role is. And so we're asking here, Dave, Jacques' team will report back within 4 months to the Environment and Community Committee on that role. So we need it outlined. And at that time also reporting back on the terms of reference for the Sea Change Political Reference Group. Now I'm open to what the makeup of that group might be, if there are members of the Hauraki Gulf Forum here or others.
It's too early, Wayne.
To put their hands up. Members, the reason why I'm suggesting it has a reference group is this is a really important body of work, and I want some political steer with the staff rather than just wait for the report to arrive. This is critical work. A lot of people are expecting us to lead out on this work. Now, I would hope that we can all buy into that and buy into the importance of it. There's a lot of eyes on this council at the moment, and as Councillor Walker and Councillor Watson and others have pointed out, we've been dragging the chain on sediment control. We've got a major issue just on sediment, let alone the other 4 or 5 key focus areas that Sea Change are mentioning. So I will move those recommendations. I'm happy to take any further queries or questions on the recommendations, but I will move them. Do I have a second?
So you've changed the reference to the Hauraki Gulf Forum?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's reporting back as to the Environment and Community Committee.
Yep. I'll second, Mr. Chair.
On the roll, and I have a second from the Deputy Mayor. Thank you. Member Hanavi.
No, I was going to second it, but
Beat you to it.
Sorry, can I take the second? Can I take
I'm easy, and I deferred to my my elders.
Good. I'll be over to the office. And so we're not determining the terms of reference here right now for the reference group. That comes back, and we consider that. We consider it actually at the Environment and Community Committee. Now, going to the membership, I don't want to jump the gun on the membership. I actually think the deputy chair of this committee is going to be quite committed.
Yep.
So I might would like to be on it. I'll put the deputy mayor in there in place of the deputy chair of the committee. Councillor Walker, you would like to participate? Are there others that would like to participate?
Have you spoken to your deputy and she doesn't want to be on it?
Look, I will, we can confirm that at another time, but I'm just mindful of an election cycle.
Yeah, I am too, but she still is your deputy.
Absolutely.
So
I,
question.
Well, I will keep her in there and I'll break it.
Ask it.
Yeah.
Break it. Let us work that one out.
Okay.
Councillor Simpson.
So just a question, probably if I may, to Councillor Lee, Mike Lee. Mike, you raised some points around timing and the legality, for want of a better word. Are you happier with the terms of reference, reference groups framework that's up there now?
Can I, through you, Mr Chair, respond to that?
Yes, you can, Mr.
Go ahead, Mike. No
Councillor.
one's listening.
I'm listening, Councillor.
The change made to the reference to the Hauraki Golf Forum is good. That's appropriate. It's taking away the idea of the Hauraki Golf
Governance.
Forum being a governing body, yet another one.
Yeah.
So that's fine, including nothing wrong with that. I do still believe, though, that the chair is in adding on these recommendations to what the officers have recommended, is being over eager about this in order, wanting to get across it. There is staff work that needs to be done, and it's going to be reported back to us. And I'm just a little bit concerned about the process being ridden by a small group of people. I'm quite happy to have good advice without a political input come to us cleanly from the officers, and then we decide. I'm concerned about essentially interference at this stage. I'd rather have an objective officer's report, and there are other aspects that need to be added in. And I mentioned one clear issue that in 3 years the spatial plan people, the sea change people, didn't get much information on at all, and that is the chronic problems we have with sewage going into the harbour and Gulf.
400 swimming pools.
Thank you. Are there other speakers on these motions? And Councillor Walker, have added your name. Are there others that would like to participate? Any Hauraki Golf Forum members? I know you'd be most welcome. And look, just in closing, in a very brief right of reply, members, and I take Councillor Lee's words on. Yes, there is an eagerness, Councillor Lee, there's an eagerness to address some of the issues that have been raised through sea change. They are very serious issues that are facing the Hauraki Gulf, and I don't think we should be shying away. There does need to be stronger political leadership in this domain. It's been lacking for decades, and I don't point the finger at any party in the past, let alone the Hauraki Gulf Forum, that has operated under significant constraints through statute, but has done a very good job. But there are huge challenges in the Hauraki Gulf, and we cannot just wait for the staff report. It does need to be given some guidance. And I think if you look at the reference groups and steering groups that we have established on this council, they have all assisted us, every one of them. And if you look at an item just coming up on the urban development authorities, we've had a steering group, and it has done exceedingly good work in guiding the submission to government. We do it often, we do it for good reason, and we achieve good outcomes by having greater political oversight, not less political oversight. So I urge you to support the motions. And look, I will take your last call, Councillor Walker.
Just a question, and I'm picking up on the comments that Mike has made about reporting back to this committee. So will this political reference group effectively be working something up that comes back here, so that we've got transparency across what's going on?
It will ultimately, because most of this has been transferred now to the Environment and Community Committee, it will be reporting to the Environment and Community Committee. I will just check that with Mr Kimpton. That's the intention.
So the way I wrote it, but it's very hard to communicate it all there, is that this initial membership would be available to provide advice over the next 4 months through to when the Environment and Community Committee would receive the report back, but the terms of reference and the actual membership for that long-term political reference group would be agreed at when the report comes to the Environment Community Committee at that time.
So I took my right to reply, but I will take the final question.
I just want to add value to the discussion. You know, there's been a lot of concerns about the role of the Hauraki Golf Forum.
Councillor Lee, you've actually had 3 speaking turns. This is your 3rd speaking
It's an issue that really concerns me.
Well,
I
you can
represent the
have mine.
Hauraki Golf. I thought you'd given me the floor, but I'm not allowed to speak?
No, I will let you
Okay.
speak for the 3rd
Look,
time.
I'm just trying to add value. You've mentioned the role of the Hauraki Golf Forum, and you've done so appropriately with the amendment. Any discussion on sea change, the Hauraki Golf raises the question of the role of the forum. And there have been reviews and concerns that the forum is not working as well as it could. There has been quite a lot of confusion about what the forum's role is. Not a lot of people actually read the Act, and the role of the forum is set out in statute. Now, it's essentially what it is. It's a clearinghouse, it's an exchange, it's a feedback mechanism, it's an interactive interaction agency, and it's not being used to its best possible purpose. It seems strange to me, given that and the need to make the forum work better, that you're going to have another group, a political reference group relating to Hauraki Golf matters, not the members of the Hauraki Golf Forum. If you're really concerned about the role of the forum, you would ensure that the reference group was built around the Hauraki Golf Forum members. I believe it's a little early at this stage. I would much rather see staff work come back and then political engagement. But if you're going to have a political reference group, it seems to be rather absurd to set up yet another Hauraki Golf oversight body, not the political members of the Hauraki Golf Forum.
Thank you, and members.
Fair comment.
Did you not hear me invite the members of the Hauraki
Yes,
Golf Forum to put
exactly
their hands
said
up? So I'll put the motions, I'll put those together. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Opposite, noes.
You okay?
Declare that carried. Thank you,
Couple of
Dave.
motions.
Thank you, Jacques.
Couple of
And thank you to the Secretariat, Mr. Kimpton, for supporting.